Millionaire leaves his safe open to trap his black maid, but her reaction left him in tears. In the sun-drenched hills of Beverly Hills, California, where the air carried the faint scent of eucalyptus and the distant hum of luxury cars gliding along palm-lined streets, stood the palatial estate of James Harrington. The mansion, a masterpiece of modern architecture, rose like a monument to wealth, its glass walls reflecting the endless blue of the Pacific sky and its white stone facade gleaming under the relentless California sun. Inside, marble floors stretched across cavernous rooms polished to a mirror-like finish that caught the light of crystal chandeliers dangling like frozen waterfalls from vaulted ceilings. The soft ticking of a grandfather clock, an antique with intricate carvings of vines and roses, echoed through the halls, a quiet reminder of time's unyielding march. James Harrington, a millionaire twice over, had built his fortune in the cutthroat worlds of technology and real estate, his name synonymous with innovation and ambition. Yet for all his wealth, peace remained elusive, a distant dream buried beneath a lifetime of betrayals. His ex-wife had walked away with millions in a divorce that left him bitter, her lawyers carving out a fortune while she smiled for the cameras. Employees trusted with the keys to his empire had siphoned funds, their loyalty as fleeting as the ink on their contracts. Friends, or those he once called friends, had revealed themselves as opportunists, their hands outstretched the moment his guard was down. Each betrayal had hardened James, forging walls around his heart, as unyielding as the steel safe that sat in his private study, a fortress within a fortress. The study was James's sanctuary, a room where the chaos of the world couldn't reach. Mahogany bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes he rarely opened, but kept for their air of permanence. A single floor-to-ceiling window overlooked a rose garden, where blooms in crimson and white swayed gently in the breeze, their petals catching the morning light like tiny flames. At the room's heart stood the safe, a hulking vault of polished steel, its surface gleaming with a cold, uninviting sheen. Inside, bundles of $100 bills were stacked like bricks, their edges crisp and untouched alongside gold bars that glinted with a heavy ancient allure, and a collection of diamonds that sparkled like captured stars. The safe was more than a repository for wealth. It was a symbol of James's control, a tangible reminder that he could protect what was his. But lately, his thoughts had turned to a different kind of puzzle, not one of steel and locks, but of human nature. For 7 months, Sarah Thompson had worked as his housemaid, moving through the mansion with a quiet grace that made her nearly invisible. Sarah, 32, was a black woman with deep brown eyes that seemed to hold stories she never shared, her slender frame carrying a weight of unspoken burdens. A widow raising 2 young daughters, Lily and Emma, and caring for a mother battling cancer, she was the kind of person who moved through life with a resilience that both intrigued and unsettled James. She arrived each morning before dawn, her worn sneakers silent against the marble floors, her dark hair tied neatly into a bun, her simple uniform crisp despite its threadbare edges. She carried a small bag with a change of clothes and a folded photograph. She never showed anyone, a private talisman of the life she was fighting for. Sarah's routine was as predictable as the ticking of the grandfather clock. She began her work at 5:30 a.m., cleaning the mansion's endless surfaces with a precision that bordered on reverence. She polished the marble until it shone, dusted the chandeliers until they sparkled, and wiped down the windows until they were invisible, all without a word of complaint or a moment of hesitation. To the other staff, she was a shadow, someone who existed only in the tasks she completed. To James, she was a mystery, a puzzle he couldn't solve. Her background check was spotless, almost too perfect, he thought. No criminal record, no debts beyond the crushing medical bills and rent. she struggled to pay no hint of scandal or deceit. She didn't flatter him like the others didn't linger in rooms to catch his eye or ask questions about his life. She didn't seek his approval or his attention, and that absence of ambition gnawed at him. In a world where everyone seemed to want something, money status, a piece of his empire, Sarah's quiet integrity felt like a challenge, a dare to believe in something he had long dismissed as fiction. He couldn't shake the suspicion that her honesty was a facade, a carefully crafted mask waiting to slip. And so he devised a test, a calculated experiment to settle his doubts once and for all. One sunny morning, as the rose garden outside bloomed with a quiet intensity, James prepared the stage. He instructed his security team to disable the hallway cameras temporarily, ensuring no record of the moment would exist. He unlocked the safe in his study, swinging its heavy door wide open to reveal its contents, stacks of cash, each bundle thick enough to change a life. Gold bars their weight, a promise of security. And diamonds their facets catching the light, in a dazzling display of wealth. The safe stood exposed, a temptation so blatant it seemed to hum with possibility. James positioned himself behind a velvet curtain in the hallway, its deep burgundy folds shielding him from view. His heart was steady, but his eyes were sharp-narrowed with a quiet anticipation that felt more like judgment than curiosity. He knew Sarah's schedule down to the minute. She would enter the study at 8:42 a.m. to dust and polish her final task before moving to the upstairs rooms. He wanted to see what she would do when faced with unimaginable wealth, when no one was watching, when the choice was hers alone. Would she take a single bill, a handful, or nothing at all? Would she hesitate, her fingers trembling with indecision, or act with the certainty of someone who had planned it all along? James had seen people falter before assistance, who pocketed small sums, partners who betrayed him for larger ones. He was ready to be proven right, to confirm that Sarah, like everyone else, had a price. But as he stood there, hidden in the shadows, a small part of him, a part he barely acknowledged, hoped she would surprise him. Sarah was different, he admitted to himself, if only in fleeting moments. She didn't carry herself like someone scheming for more. Her eyes, when they met his, held no greed, only a quiet resolve that made him feel exposed, as if she could see through the walls he had built. Her daughters, Lily, 7, and Emma, 5, were her world, their names slipping out in rare moments when she spoke of them. A school play, a drawing they'd made a fever that kept her up all night. Her mother, Diane, was in the late stages of cancer, and James had overheard her once on a rare break, speaking softly into her phone about hospital bills and treatment plans. The weight of her life was palpable, yet she carried it with a dignity that made James's wealth feel trivial by comparison. He had never known that kind of struggle, not really. His challenges had been boardroom battles, not hospital waiting rooms or eviction notices. Sarah's life was a stark contrast to his own, and that contrast made her both fascinating and suspect. Could someone so burdened by hardship truly resist the lure of easy money? He doubted it, but he needed to know. As the clock ticked closer to 8:42, James's thoughts churned. He imagined Sarah reaching for the cash, her fingers brushing the bills before pulling back, caught in a moment of indecision. He pictured her slipping a single diamond into her pocket, her face unreadable, or perhaps taking nothing but leaving with a flicker of regret in her eyes. Each scenario played out in his mind, a script written by his cynicism. But beneath it all, there was a question he couldn't ignore. What if she didn't take anything? What if Sarah Thompson was exactly who she appeared to be, a woman who cleaned his home with care, who loved her family with a fierceness he could barely comprehend, who lived a life of quiet integrity in a world that rewarded none of those things? The possibility unsettled him, threatening to unravel the worldview he had spent years constructing. He tightened his grip on the curtain, his breath shallow as Sarah's footsteps approached, soft but unmistakable against the marble floor. The moment was here, and with it, the truth he both craved and feared. The test had begun, and James Harrington, for all his wealth and power, was no longer in control. The study in James Harrington's Beverly Hills mansion was a haven of precision and elegance, its mahogany bookshelves standing like sentinels against the walls, their surfaces lined with leather-bound volumes that gleamed faintly in the morning light. A single towering window framed a view of the rose garden outside, where crimson and white blooms swayed gently in the California breeze, their petals catching the sun like tiny beacons of life. The marble floor, polished to a mirror, like sheen, reflected the soft glow of a crystal chandelier overhead, its prisms scattering flecks of light across the room. At the heart of this sanctuary stood the safe, a formidable vault of polished steel. Its door swung wide open to reveal a fortune that could rewrite destinies, stacks of $100 bills bundled tightly like bricks of green temptation. Gold bars, their surfaces glinting with a heavy ancient allure, and diamonds, their facets sparkling like captured stars in the quiet morning air. James had orchestrated this moment with cold calculation, leaving the safe exposed as a test for Sarah Thompson, the housemaid who had worked for him for 7 months. Hidden behind a burgundy velvet curtain in the hallway, he watched, his heart steady, but his eyes sharp, waiting to see if Sarah's quiet integrity would hold or crumble under the weight of unimaginable wealth. Sarah entered the study at exactly 8:42 a.m., her movements as precise as the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Her worn sneakers made no sound against the marble, and her simple uniform, though slightly faded, was crisp, a testament to her care in a life that offered little room for such details. In one gloved hand, she carried a duster, its bristles already dusted with the morning's work. In her apron pocket, a cleaning rag lay neatly folded, ready for the next surface. Her dark hair was tied back in a tight bun, and her deep brown eyes, heavy with unspoken stories, focused on the task at hand. Sarah, 32, was a black woman whose life was a tapestry of resilience woven through hardship. A widow raising 2 daughters, Lily, 7, and Emma, 5, while caring for her mother, Diane, whose cancer treatments drained her meager earnings. Her world was one of eviction notices, hospital bills, and sleepless nights. Yet she moved through the mansion with a grace that made her nearly invisible, a shadow among the opulence. She began her work dusting the bookshelves with methodical care, her hands steady as she wiped away the faint traces of dust that clung to the edges of untouched volumes. The room was silent, save for the soft rustle of her movements and the distant hum of the world outside. She didn't notice the safe at first, her focus fixed on the shelves where the scent of old leather mingled with the faint polish she used. Each stroke of her duster was deliberate, a small act of order in a life that often felt chaotic. Sarah's days began before dawn, when she left her cramped Los Angeles apartment to catch the early bus, her small bag holding a change of clothes and a creased photograph she never showed anyone. Her daughters were her anchor, their laughter the only light in a world shadowed by loss and worry. Diane's illness had grown worse, the chemotherapy sessions stretching on with no promise of recovery, and the bills piled higher each month, their numbers a constant reminder of how close Sarah was to losing everything. Yet, she carried on her faith and love for her family, holding her steady. In the mansion, she was invisible to most, her presence defined by the tasks she completed, polishing marble, cleaning windows, dusting chandeliers. To James, she was a puzzle, her quiet strength both intriguing and suspect, a challenge to his belief that everyone had a price. As Sarah turned to the mahogany desk, a flash of light caught her eye, a sharp glint bouncing off the safe's open door. She froze her duster, suspended in midair, her breath catching in her throat. The safe, usually locked and unyielding, stood exposed, its contents a stark contrast to the simplicity of her life. The stacks of cash, thick and pristine, could erase her debts in an instant, pay for Diane's treatments, and secure a future for Lily and Emma. The gold bars, heavy and cold, promised stability she had never known, and the diamonds glittering in the sunlight whispered of a life free from the grind of survival. For a long moment, Sarah stood still, her eyes locked on the safe, the silence of the room pressing against her. The grandfather clock ticked on each second, stretching into eternity, amplifying the weight of the moment. She glanced toward the hallway, her instincts sharp, but saw no one. The mansion felt emptier than usual, the absence of footsteps or voices making the safe's contents seem louder, more insistent. James, hidden behind the curtain, watched her every move, his pulse quickening. His fingers tightened on the velvet, his eyes searching for any sign of weakness. A trembling hand, a lingering glance, a moment of indecision that would confirm his suspicions. He had seen people falter before their true natures revealed in the face of temptation. He expected Sarah to reach out to let her fingers brush the cash, to hesitate just long enough to betray the honesty she wore like a shield. But Sarah did something entirely unexpected. She set her duster on the desk, her movements slow and deliberate, as if grounding herself in the familiar. Reaching into her apron, she pulled out her cleaning rag, its edges frayed from countless uses, but clean a tool as unassuming as she was. With the same care she applied to every surface in the mansion, she began wiping the edge of the safe's door, her cloth gliding over the steel with precision. She didn't touch the money, didn't count the bills, didn't let her eyes linger on the gold or diamonds. She cleaned the safe as if it were just another part of the room, her focus on the task rather than the wealth it contained. James's breath caught his chest tightening as he watched. He had prepared for greed, for a quick hand slipping a bill into her pocket, for a flicker of temptation in her eyes. But Sarah's actions were a quiet rebuke to his cynicism. Her face was unreadable, her lips pressed into a thin line. But her eyes held a depth of emotion, resolve perhaps, or the weight of her own burdens. She moved with a reverence that made the safe seem almost sacred, not for its contents, but for what it represented: a choice. Then something extraordinary happened. Sarah paused, her rag still in hand, and reached into her apron pocket. She glanced at the hallway once more, ensuring she was alone, and pulled out a small, creased photograph. It was old, its edges worn from countless touches, and it showed Lily and Emma grinning widely in front of a hospital bed where Diane lay with a pale but warm smile. Sarah placed the photo on the shelf beside the safe, her fingers lingering on its surface, as if drawing strength from it. Her lips moved whispering words, too soft for James to hear: a prayer, a promise, a plea for her family's survival. She kissed the photo gently, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, then tucked it back into her pocket. With a steady hand, she reached for the safe's door and closed it, the heavy steel clicking shut, with a finality that echoed through the silent room. Sarah resumed her cleaning, moving to the desk, as if nothing had happened, her duster sweeping across its surface with the same care she had shown the safe. James felt his throat tighten, a wave of emotion crashing over him. He had orchestrated this moment to expose Sarah, to prove that her honesty was a facade. But what he witnessed was something far greater. She hadn't just resisted temptation. She had treated the safe with a dignity that made his test feel small and cruel. The photograph, the whispered words, the gentle kiss they spoke, a love and strength that transcended the wealth he had dangled before her. Sarah wasn't just a housemaid passing a test. She was a woman carrying a life of hardship with a grace that made James's wealth seem insignificant. He stepped back from the curtain, his eyes burning with tears he hadn't shed in years. As Sarah continued her work, oblivious to his presence, James slipped away, his mind racing with the image of the closed safe and the photograph that had undone him. The test was over, but the truth it revealed was just beginning to take root, a seed of change planted in the heart of a man who had forgotten how to believe. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the Beverly Hills mansion in a soft twilight glow, its glass walls reflecting the fading pinks and purples of the California sky. Inside, James Harrington sat alone in his study. The heavy steel safe now locked its contents undisturbed, but no longer the center of his thoughts. The room felt different tonight, its mahogany bookshelves and polished marble floor no longer a fortress, but a quiet witness to the morning's events. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed louder each second, a reminder of the moment that had shifted something deep within him. James's mind replayed Sarah Thompson's actions with relentless clarity. Her pause before the open safe, the careful way she wiped its edges without touching the stacks of cash or glittering diamonds, the creased photograph of her daughters and mother, and the soft kiss she placed on it before closing the safe's door. He had orchestrated the test to expose her, to confirm his belief that everyone had a price. But what he witnessed was a strength he hadn't anticipated, a quiet, unshakable integrity that made his wealth feel trivial and his cynicism feel like a burden. Sarah, the housemaid, who moved through his home like a shadow, had undone him with a single unseen act of love. James leaned back in his leather chair, his fingers tracing the edge of his desk as he stared at the safe. He had spent years building walls not just around his fortune, but around his heart. His ex-wife's betrayal had left him with a ledger of losses, both financial and emotional, her departure a wound that never fully healed. Employees who stole friends, who schemed each, had reinforced his belief that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. Sarah was different, and that difference unsettled him. Her background was painfully clean, her life a tapestry of hardship woven with resilience. She was a widow at 32, raising Lily 7 and Emma 5, while caring for her mother Diane, whose cancer treatments drained her meager savings. Eviction notices haunted her mailbox, and yet she arrived each morning before dawn, her sneakers silent on the marble, her hands steady as she polished his world to perfection. She didn't flatter, didn't pry, didn't linger. Her silence had intrigued him, but it was her actions that morning that pierced through his defenses, leaving him raw and exposed. He couldn't sleep. The image of Sarah's photograph, Lily and Emma's bright smiles, Diane's frail but hopeful expression burned in his mind. He saw her whispered words too soft to hear, and the reverence in her movements as she closed the safe. James had expected greed, hesitation, or at least a flicker of temptation, but Sarah had shown him something else, a love so deep it outweighed the promise of wealth, a strength that held firm under pressure. He felt a pang of shame, not for her, but for himself. His test, so carefully planned, now seemed cruel, a reflection of his own inability to believe in goodness. He had judged Sarah through the lens of his past, assuming she would falter as others had. Instead, she had revealed a truth he hadn't prepared to face, that integrity could exist quiet and unassuming in the heart of someone he had barely seen. As the night deepened, James's thoughts turned to Sarah's life. He imagined her small apartment cramped and worn, where she returned each evening to her daughter's laughter and her mother's fading strength. He thought of the hospital bills piling up, the eviction notices threatening to upend her world, the sleepless nights she must endure. Her burdens were not abstract to him anymore. They were as real as the photograph she carried, as tangible as the tears he had fought back while watching her. For the first time in years, James felt a stirring of something he had long buried, empathy, perhaps, or the faint hope that he could be more than the guarded millionaire he had become. He wanted to do something not out of pity but out of respect, a recognition of the rare goodness he had witnessed. The idea came to him slowly, like a tide creeping in, and by dawn it had solidified into a plan. Before Sarah arrived the next morning, James sat at his desk, the study bathed in the soft light of early sunrise. He took a sheet of his personal stationery, its edges embossed with his initials, and began to write. His hand, usually steady from years of signing contracts, trembled slightly as he formed the words. "Integrity is priceless," he wrote, "but so is peace. You've given me both. Your daughters and your mother deserve a life without fear. Please accept the enclosed without guilt. It's not a reward, it's a thank you." He folded the letter carefully, slipping a blank signed check inside, an offering that could cover her mother's treatments, her debts, her daughter's future. He sealed the envelope and placed it on the kitchen counter, where Sarah would find it when she began her day. The act felt foreign to him, vulnerable in a way he hadn't allowed himself to be in years. He wasn't buying her loyalty or erasing his guilt. He was honoring her, acknowledging a strength he had almost failed to see. When Sarah arrived at 5:30 a.m., her routine unchanged. Despite the weight of her life, she found the envelope on the counter, her name written in James's neat, heavy script. She paused, her fingers hesitating over the paper, as if sensing its significance. She opened it slowly, her breath catching as she read the words. Her eyes widened at the check, its blank space, a canvas of possibility. She sank into the nearest chair, the letter trembling in her hands, tears streaming down her face. The weight of years, hospital bills, eviction notices, the constant fear of losing her family, lifted just slightly, a crack of light in her darkness. She clutched the letter to her chest, overwhelmed not just by the gift but by the recognition it carried. For so long she had been invisible, her struggles unnoticed by the world she served. Now someone had seen her, not as a housemaid, but as a person, her choices honored in a way she had never expected. That weekend, James did something unprecedented. He drove to Sarah's apartment in a modest Los Angeles neighborhood, far from the glitz of Beverly Hills. The building was weathered, its paint peeling, but inside it was warm, filled with the laughter of Lily and Emma. James brought a folder of documents, paperwork, to help Sarah purchase a new home in a safer area with a small garden where her daughters could play. He sat at her cramped kitchen table, a stark contrast to the grandeur of his mansion, and felt oddly at ease. Lily showed him a drawing of a rainbow. Emma tugged at his sleeve to tell him about her favorite book, and Sarah watched with quiet gratitude, her eyes shining with a mix of disbelief and hope. For the first time, James wasn't the millionaire in control. He was just a man learning to see the world through someone else's eyes. The visit wasn't about charity. It was about connection, a bridge built on the foundation of Sarah's integrity and James's newfound trust. The days following James Harrington's visit to Sarah Thompson's modest Los Angeles apartment felt like a new chapter, not just for her, but for him as well. The Beverly Hills mansion, once a fortress of solitude, where James guarded his wealth and his heart with equal ferocity, began to feel less like a barrier and more like a home. Its marble floors, still polished to a mirror-like sheen, no longer echoed with the cold silence of distrust. Instead, they carried the faint warmth of possibility. The rose garden outside the study window bloomed with renewed vibrancy, its crimson and white petals catching the California sunlight as if mirroring the shift in James's perspective. Sarah's quiet act of integrity, closing the safe without touching its contents, placing her creased photograph of her daughters and mother beside it, had done more than pass his test. It had cracked open a heart he thought was long sealed, forcing him to confront the walls he had built around himself. Sarah, the housemaid who had moved through his world like a shadow, had become a beacon, illuminating a truth he had spent years denying, that goodness could exist untainted by greed, and that trust, though fragile, could be rebuilt. In the weeks that followed, James took steps to transform his gesture of gratitude into something lasting. He offered Sarah a new role at the mansion, not as a housemaid, but as head of domestic operations. The position came with a substantial salary, full benefits, and a flexible schedule that allowed her to attend her daughter's school events and her mother's medical appointments without the constant dread of financial ruin. Sarah accepted with a quiet nod, her deep brown eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and disbelief. The role wasn't just a job. It was a recognition of her worth, a chance to build a future for Lily 7 and Emma 5 without the shadow of eviction notices or hospital bills. The blank check James had left her had already begun to change her life, paying for her mother, Diane's chemotherapy, settling overdue rent, and securing a deposit on a modest but safe home in a neighborhood where her daughters could play without fear. Yet, it was James's presence at her kitchen table, laughing with her girls over their drawings, that meant the most. For Sarah, who had spent years feeling invisible, his acknowledgement of her character was a gift beyond money, a validation of the choices she made when no one was watching. Sarah's new home, purchased with James's help, was a small but sturdy house with a patch of green in the backyard where Lily and Emma could run and chase butterflies. The walls were painted a soft yellow chosen by the girls, and the living room held a second-hand couch that Sarah had covered with a bright throw to make it her own. Diane, though still frail, had a room with a window that caught the morning light, a small comfort in her ongoing battle with cancer. Sarah moved through this new space with a lightness she hadn't felt in years, her steps no longer heavy with the weight of survival. She hung the creased photograph of her daughters and mother on the fridge, a daily reminder of why she had kept going, why she had closed the safe that morning in the mansion. Her life was far from perfect. Medical bills still loomed, and Diane's prognosis remained uncertain. But for the first time, Sarah felt a flicker of hope, a sense that her choices had built something enduring. For James, the change was just as profound. The mansion, once a symbol of his isolation, began to feel alive with purpose. He found himself seeking Sarah's input not just on household matters, but on small decisions that revealed his growing trust, whether to plant new roses in the garden or host a charity event in the ballroom. Their conversations, once limited to brief exchanges about cleaning schedules, grew into moments of connection. Sarah spoke of her daughter's dreams, Lily's love for painting, Emma's obsession with stories, and James listened not as an employer, but as a friend. He shared fragments of his own life stories he hadn't told anyone in years, the startup he built from nothing, the loneliness of his divorce, the weight of carrying wealth in a world that seemed to prey on it. Sarah listened without judgment, her presence a quiet anchor that made him feel seen in a way he hadn't since his youth. Their relationship wasn't defined by the power imbalance of employer and employee anymore. It was a partnership built on mutual respect, a bridge forged by her integrity and his willingness to change. James began to see the world differently, his cynicism softening with each interaction. He noticed the other staff in the mansion, the gardener who hummed while trimming the hedges, the cook who slipped extra cookies to Sarah's daughters when they visited. He started asking their names, learning their stories, realizing how much he had missed by assuming everyone was out to take from him. Sarah's influence rippled outward, touching corners of his life he hadn't examined in years. He donated to a local hospital, funding a wing for cancer patients in Diane's name, not as a grand gesture, but as a quiet thank you to the woman who had reminded him of his own humanity. He hosted Lily and Emma at the mansion one weekend, turning the sprawling lawn into a playground where they ran through sprinklers and laughed under the sun. Their joy, so unfiltered and pure, reminded him of a time when he believed in second chances before betrayal had taught him to close himself off. Sarah, too, was changed by the experience. The weight of being seen, of having her integrity acknowledged, gave her a new kind of strength. She took on her new role with the same precision she had applied to cleaning, but now with a confidence that came from knowing her work mattered. She organized the mansion's staff with a quiet authority, ensuring everyone felt valued, their efforts recognized. She brought Lily and Emma to work on occasion, their laughter filling the halls, a sound that made even the grand chandeliers seem warmer. Diane, though still battling her illness, found comfort in knowing her daughter was no longer alone in her fight. Sarah's life, once defined by survival, began to include moments of joy, a picnic with her girls, a quiet evening planting flowers in their new garden, a phone call with James discussing plans for the mansion's next event. She had always believed in doing the right thing, even when it was hard, but now she saw the impact of that choice, not just on her family, but on a man who had seemed untouchable. The story of James and Sarah is a testament to the power of unseen choices. Sarah's decision to close the safe to honor her values over her desperation was a quiet act of courage that rippled outward, touching a man who had forgotten how to trust. James's response, his letter, his visit, his trust, showed that even the most guarded hearts can open when faced with genuine goodness. Their story teaches us that integrity is not just about resisting temptation. It's about choosing who we want to be, even when no one is watching. It's about recognizing the humanity in others, offering second chances, and building bridges where walls once stood. Sarah didn't just pass a test. She reminded James that trust is not a weakness, but a strength, a gift that can heal old wounds and create new possibilities. James, in turn, gave Sarah more than financial security. He gave her the dignity of being seen, of knowing her choices mattered. Lesson learned: the truest tests are often the ones no one sees. Integrity shown in quiet moments can change lives, not just for those who act with honor, but for those who witness it. Sarah's choice to close the safe, to place her family's love above temptation, inspired James to rediscover his own capacity for kindness and trust. Their story reminds us to act with honor, even when the world isn't watching, and to look for the goodness in others, even when our past tells us it's gone. It challenges us to ask, what would you do if no one was watching? The answer lies in the choices we make every day, the small acts of courage that define who we are and shape the world around us. Let Sarah and James's story inspire you to choose integrity, to offer kindness, and to believe that one honest act can change everything.